The private equity firms are trying to get liquidity in the 2 to 5 year range, and they're generally trying to do three things. They're trying to grow EBITDA. They're trying to pay down debt. The third piece is multiple expansion. That is the holy grail.
Do you think there could be maybe a cycle back to public with IPOs?
Public markets are very buoyant right now. Valuations are very high. It's going to suck more companies into the public market. Meanwhile, private equity is at a very low level. Liquidity events for private equity funds have been low. And so private equity is buying less.
What is the textbook and what is the reality?
Well, there's what the private equity industry would like, and then there is the sober reality of what is.
And what comes first, the deal or the capital? So Arthur Hollingsworth, before we get too far into it, I just want to describe the power of, you always hear your network is your net worth. So a couple weeks ago, I was at lunch with a friend of mine, Creighton Webb, and I see this gentleman one table over, and after lunch, I get to LinkedIn, and the first thing that pops up is you at the World Cup, and I'm like, I think I just saw that guy at lunch, sent you a random cold message, and you're like, yeah, that was me. And here we are.
Yeah, Creighton is, in my opinion, the top PR executive CEO in Texas. And a funny twist on that World Cup LinkedIn post is when I post about my business and it either has a business picture or my picture, I get between 500 and 1,000 likes. When my fiance Mackenzie is on there, I get 20,000 to 100,000 likes. So we know who's drawing the crowd, and it's not me.
You know, that's what's interesting about LinkedIn is like LinkedIn is a social media for professionalism and this and that, but yet, you know, attractive humans still win.
Well, it has to be interesting and not too many pictures, not too much text, because people really don't want to scroll through a whole bunch of text, and something topical. And there's always interesting things in Texas, interesting things in the business world and geopolitically, globally. So I find it's the only social media I follow.
Yeah. Years ago, I was on Facebook all the time for work, and I'm now not Facebook at all. And I have to reteach myself how to use it from time to time if I want to post there. But what's interesting about social media for this conversation is private equity, family office, venture capital, capital markets typically aren't that, you know, they're kind of secretive. Do you find that true, or are you a little bit more out there, or what do you have to say about that?
I think there's been a shift change. Private equity of old was heavy on the private. And if you looked at a private equity firm's website, you know, it would say log in if you're an investor, and that's it. Now, social media, LinkedIn, your website, et cetera, is a way to attract the constituents. And I think of private equity as a three-legged stool. You need great companies to buy. You need access to capital, to lending, and you need access to equity. And unfortunately, one or two of those legs always destroys the other ones. If there's too much equity, prices go up, great deals aren't available, et cetera. But to round out my point, your LinkedIn presence, your website brings those three legs of the stool together for you.
Can you define in your own words private equity?
Private equity historically was easy to define. It was, we go out and buy great companies, use some amount of leverage, grow them 4 or 5 years, increase the EBITDA, pay down the debt, and sell them. Now there's all kinds of silos within private equity. There's credit funds are huge. There's private equity real estate, which is, to me, you know, there was always just real estate. Now there's specifically private equity real estate. There's venture capital. There's secondaries. There's all kinds of branches of it. And then within private equity, everyone's gone to industry specialization. So, you know, one fund does not look like another fund as they used to.
For you specifically, what industries are you into?
Well, our funds are targeted to Texas. That's a little unusual. Most funds are not geographically targeted. But as I point out to people, I like to say if Texas were a country again, as it was at one time, it'd be the eighth largest economy on earth. So restricting myself to the eighth largest economy on earth is not bad. And by being in Texas, I can really cultivate my deal flow, cultivate my lenders, my equity investors, and frankly, get to the companies a lot more frequently. I can fly or drive and be to any portfolio company within 2 to 3 hours.
What's funny is you hear that all the time about how if Texas was its own country, it would be the eighth largest GDP in the world. But you're the first person I've ever heard say again. And I love that. And it completely makes sense because the whole reason you would go to the whole reason you would lock down on a specialty in an industry is so you can have domain expertise, have the network, and what better network than Texas?
Well, Texas also has another unique feature that is not well known, which is we are the only region on Earth to go from an oil-dependent economy to a much larger global diversified economy, and we're the number one exporter of all the states in the United States. So we pulled something off with what I like to call, and others, the Texas miracle. By putting the ingredients in place, we've diversified our economy. And Saudi Arabia, where I've been serving on a board, is very interested in how we pulled all that off, because that's exactly what Mohammed bin Salman's trying to do with Vision 2030.
Isn't that similar to what like Dubai has been trying to do for the last 20 years?
Dubai's done it very successfully. They've leaned heavily on tourism, real estate, et cetera. And other oil-rich countries are really looking at Texas and how we pulled it off and trying to replicate many of the facets of that.
When you say the businesses you're into are Texas specific, are you industry specific as well, or is it just as if you're in Texas and the numbers look right, let's make a deal?
Once you're geographically constrained, you don't want to put guardrails on industry groups, but we tend to find ourselves very frequently in three industries. One is infrastructure, one is metals, and the third is aerospace defense.
I was just watching a podcast yesterday with Michael Levy, Crow Holdings. It just came out with the Powers podcast, and it was interesting because Crow Holdings has been traditionally real estate, and they brought up, and I apologize if I'm paraphrasing heavily, but the shift towards aerospace and defense and how that is going to be such a massive investment vertical. And what better place than Texas than to pursue that?
Texas has a lot of natural advantages in aerospace defense. They have the infrastructure. They have all the supplying industries. It's a non-union state, right-to-work state. There's low regulation, government regulation. There's a pro-business culture. No governor in the United States is more pro-business than Governor Abbott. And there's a lot of existing customer facilities, whether it be prime contractors like Northrop, Raytheon, Boeing, et cetera, whether it's actual government facilities, armories, arsenals, et cetera. I think it's the prime feeding ground for aerospace defense in the United States.
Let's talk about metals. Like, I don't necessarily think metal or mining when I think Texas. I think oil, I think energy, I think cattle, maybe even wind and solar, land rich, ranches, et cetera. But metals, I've never heard that in relation to an investment strategy here in Texas.
Good. More for me. Yeah. But we're never going to own a great big steel company. There are elements of the metals industry that are scale specific, and we'll never play in that. But in niche parts of the metals universe, we've been a very successful player. We own Trinity Forge in Mansfield, which is open die steel forging operation. They serve 6 of the largest global defense companies in the United States, forging steel and machining steel. We've owned ESP Specialty Steel in Houston, that was one of 3 national stainless steel master distributors. So their supplier is the global steel mills. By the way, Ukraine had the largest stainless steel mill globally. So it's importing stainless steel, and then their customers are not end users. Their customers were general steel service centers like Ryerson, et cetera, around the country. So we're in that business. So we've had good success in niche parts of the metals markets, and I'm not exactly sure, but I would hazard to guess that Texas is the biggest consumer of metal components in the country.
So is it the mining aspect, the forging aspect? Are y'all horizontally integrated, vertically integrated, or what specifically are you in? Because you just listed off a few companies that are
Right.
in that field, but it sounds like the manufacturing side. Like, how do you determine where you are in that niche?
We're fairly downstream. We're not at the mine mining the iron ore, et cetera. And one little factoid, Birmingham, Alabama is the only place in the world that has every raw material to make steel. So kind of interesting to be so close to that. But we're not going to be in mining. We're not in a steel mill, but we'll take billet from steel mills and forge that into finished components. We'll take all kinds of goods from stainless steel mills in the days that we owned ESP and distribute those. So we're at the downstream manufacturing distribution end of the metal supply chain.
In your role as a private equity company or investor, with specifically like the steel mills or the metals component, the different companies, where do y'all step in to assist or consult board member, consulting wise? The context I'm getting at is like tariffs roll in. A buddy of mine, he has a steel manufacturing company in Mexico, and they had to shift the way they did it because what they ended up started doing was they would import steel from United States to Mexico, so then they could export their goods back to the United States and it be a United States product.
Right.
Because it was cheaper to do that than the tariffs. So your role in private equity, do you help companies navigate those situations, or do you leave it to the management team of those companies to figure it out their own?
The private equity model of old was you buy the company, we'll see you once a quarter for a board meeting. And too much happens too quickly to wait 3 months. So with our portfolio companies, we pick 30 minutes to an hour on the same time, the same day of every single week, 52 weeks a year, vacations or no vacations. And then we have the company produce and we refine it and develop it, all the key metric reports. So they're sending out, here's what we did last week. Here are the things moving the numbers. And then we have a call, and not just with the CEO. Oftentimes it's the top 4 or 5 people in the company. Everyone knows what's going on. Problems are addressed immediately every week. And we have a reporting metric that's much more engaging than waiting for monthly financials, which don't tell the whole story. Monthly financials are very rear view mirror, backward looking, whereas metrics, backlog, bookings, pipeline, et cetera, are very forward looking. And that's where we try to be. And then that allows us to be nimble when geopolitical events, industry specific events occur. We can move immediately.
Do you think that's like a common attribute among everybody, or do you think you're special in doing that?
Well, I think I'm special, but
Well, you are, sir. Arthur,
not for these reasons. I think the industry has moved or is moving in that direction. And I think there's a lot more interaction between private equity firms and portfolio companies. And I think private equity has also, for quite some time has gotten into the add-on acquisition, the buy and build, and the private equity firms are very active in business development parts of private equity. It's also important to know what you don't know. Here you're sitting across from a management team, and it can be a bad practice to sort of tell them to do X, Y, and Z when they've got 10, 20, 30 years in an industry. They've seen more cycles. So I think of myself as the chief spaghetti thrower. I throw the spaghetti on the wall. Management tells me what's going to stick, what's going to work. And then my mantra is to open up ideas and ways of thinking that they may not have run across, and then they run it through their filter of industry expertise, and we come out with good decisions, hopefully.
Talking about the cycles of flow and companies, like, we did a podcast with Nicole Chambers about a year ago with Tech Stock Exchange, and learned that, years ago you had 8,000 public companies and now you have like 4,000 companies. Obviously that's because private equity kind of swooped in. Do you think there could be maybe a cycle back to public with IPOs? We've got several major ones happening this year.
That is a great question. And when I speak about private equity to business school classes, the way I give it relevance is I say everything around you, except for the live plants and the birds and the bees, was made by a company. Everything in this room, the table, the chairs, the cameras, etc., everything was made by a company. And all companies globally fall into three buckets. They're either privately owned through a private equity fund, they're family owned, or they're public. And they're going to always be in those three buckets. And companies will move between the buckets. They will never go, they can even go from public back to a family ownership if a family that took a company public wants to repurpose it as family controlled. They're going to move between those buckets. And I think we've seen the pendulum move too far away from access to public markets. I'm so excited about the Texas Stock Exchange. I think it's going to really put Texas more on the map, the movement of Goldman, where Dallas is going to be the second highest number of their executives and team members globally. JP Morgan's big moves here. We're going to see the pendulum move back, and the number of public companies will climb. Regulation is the key, or limiting regulation is the key to growing the public ownership in the United States.
So obviously that company movement, whether it go family to private, private to public, public back to private, is typically based off of capitalism, and we think we can make more money doing it this strategy. Is that a fair assessment?
I think there's a lot of motivations that work between those three pods, and a lot of it has to do with valuation. Public markets are very buoyant right now. Valuations are very high. It's going to suck more companies into the public market. Meanwhile, private equity is at a very low level. The amount of liquidity events for private equity funds has been low. That's hampered fundraising other than at the mega funds. And so private equity is buying less. So you have a situation where public markets have high valuations and liquidity. Private equity has low level of liquidity and also stumbling a bit with higher interest rates. So I do see private equity firms using the public markets to take portfolio companies happening. And it seems now every few days there's another PE fund announcing an IPO.
It's interesting that you bring up this topic of liquidity events, because it feels like it used to be, and I might be confusing, conflating venture capital. Hey, we're trying to do a thing and we're trying to have a liquidity event 3 to 5 years, et cetera. What is the typical time horizon for private equity? Is that more long-term, or is there like a target goal?
Well, there's what the private equity industry would like. And then there is the sober reality of what is. And the number of what's called zombie funds, funds that have very aged portfolio companies, is growing by the quarter. There's a lot of companies, a lot of funds that are hung up, and possibly buoyant public markets will help address that.
So if the goal of a private equity company is to make money, and how are they making money? Is it through liquidity events? Is it through distributions? Is it through evaluations? Is it through like what we're seeing with all the AI companies and just like, well, how do we make more money? We'll just raise more money. What is the textbook and what is the reality?
The private equity firms are trying to get liquidity in the 2 to 5 year range, and they're generally trying to do three things. They're trying to grow EBITDA, grow the earnings. That might be add-on acquisitions. That might be growth of the platform company. They're trying to pay down debt. In acquiring the company, they're going to use some amount of senior, some amount of mezzanine. They want to pay down the debt because at the end, the enterprise value that they sell for, they have to pay off the debt. So if I'm shrinking the wedge of the capital structure that's debt, there's more of that enterprise value that flows to the equity holder. And then the third piece is multiple expansion. And that is the holy grail. And generally speaking, that's from what I refer to as the thermal layer. You reach thermal layers at different levels of EBITDA. Companies go for higher valuation multiples if they can get 25 million of EBITDA, 100 million of EBITDA, 500 million of EBITDA. And so, and there's micro levels below 25. A $10 million EBITDA company gets a higher multiple than a 9. And so size helps multiple, refining the business model to be a more multi-cycle, profitable business model, et cetera. Any way you can get a higher multiple, that's a higher holy grail. So those three are the key to growing the net value the fund gets back for what they bought 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago.
And there also has to be like an industry component as well, right? For the multiples.
Yeah, industry's very important. And 3 years ago, aerospace defense companies were not doing very well, or maybe 4 years ago. Now they're on fire. Boeing, on the commercial side, Boeing has worked out their problems. Their production rates are climbing astronomically. Ironically, there was a window of time when Airbus could have completely trounced Boeing and put them in the dust. And Airbus did not strike the killer blow when Boeing was under so much regulatory scrutiny. Now Boeing is outpacing Airbus. On the defense side, we didn't have the Ukraine war. We didn't have the Iran war. Europe has woken up and said the devil is at our doorstep, and we need to get our spending on defense out of the 1 to 2% range, closer to 3 to 5% of GDP. So I just use aerospace defense as things could blow your way positively or negatively. But industries go in and out of favor, but anything that can make your business model look more like a repeat business, the better.
It's funny because like a while back, I did a podcast with Ken Hersh, and I made the comment about, man, I wish I can go back in time and get into oil and gas. And I can't remember the specific, but he basically looked at me like I was an idiot going, yeah, because you see the good side, but you have to remember in a career, especially in oil and gas, it's a lot of this.
Yeah.
And in having a successful career in the oil and gas world is being able to sustain the lows and then take advantage of the highs. And when I look at your three pillars, infrastructure, metals, aero defense, it's like, it's so obvious as an adult because yes, aero defense is kind of sexy and in vogue now, but historically, like you said, it's like, who cares? It's afterthoughts. You're not really thinking about it. But from an investment standpoint, it's like sexy is not always the best way to make money. It's what will last, what's going to be here. Oil and gas is going to be here. Metals is going to be here. Infrastructure, air defense. So it's so obvious.
Yeah. Ken Hersh is such a Dallas treasure, building natural gas partners, running the Bush Center. What a business and community service icon. We've had experience with energy, and as you point out, some of it's been good and some of it's been bad.
Yeah.
But I must say right now, we're in a great stretch for liquefied natural gas because of the two wars. The Ukraine-Russia war has taken Russia pipeline gas out of Europe, so LNG has been booming there. And more recently, in the Iran war, the hits that Qatar has taken has knocked out 20% of the global supply of LNG. So, players like Cheniere, Venture Global, and others adding LNG capacity in the United States is a perfect time, and I think that will be a long-term run for LNG.
I actually used to live in Qatar when they were building that big LNG facility. I've been to that facility it wasn't a facility yet. I've been to the when they were building it way back when. It was like 16 years ago. So.
Yeah. Well, LNG is 250 degrees below zero and explodes. It does not do well with missiles and drones. And you can't just come out with a wrench and fix the hole. Like, it's going to be a long time before these LNG facilities are repaired.
Well, also, what's the point of repairing it if the risk to it being tomorrow another attack?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where do you want to be globally for LNG? You want to be in the United States where there's no attacks and you have access to all that beautiful Haynesville, low-price natural gas. The Gulf Coast, Louisiana, and Texas are beautifully situated for multi-decade run on LNG. And I see the United States, its two competitors in LNG are Australia and Qatar, and I see them distancing themselves particularly from Qatar.
So let's get into deal flow. Like, what makes a good deal for you or a great deal?
Most of our transactions were the first institutional capital into a company. And so our target market are family-owned Texas companies. Maybe they're first generation. We have one in the portfolio now where the CEO is fourth generation. So we want to talk to family companies, and we want to build a relationship, because to a family that owns a business, that business is their baby. Institutional capital, they don't fall in love with their companies. They flip them, they sell them, they recap them, et cetera. But if a family owner has an emotional bond, and you have to bond with that family, and you need to have lunches and dinners and get-togethers, and but that process has to start somewhere. So where does it start? Well, if a family wants to even think about selling a company, they're going to talk to one of three groups: their lawyer, their wealth advisor, or their accountant. So what we try to do is network with those three industry groups and say, hey, if you've got a family even thinking about selling, put us in front of them, and we can tell them about the process. No cost, no agenda. We'll just tell you what you need to do, because it's the year before you fire the starting gun that's key. That family needs to get all the jets out of the company. They need to get deadwood out. They need to get, some of the family members are the most valuable employees in the whole company. Some are deadwood. They need to get audits in place, regular monthly reporting. I encourage them to, build a data room before you're being asked to build a data room, because that will teach you what you need to put in there. All your corporate records, your financials, your environmental reports, your, real estate deeds and records, et cetera, build that data room. So, in short, we want to meet family owners of companies in Texas. And that wealth manager is the most motivated of those three, because the lawyer and the accountant might lose a client, but the wealth manager is going to get a lot more business.
I guess at that point though, when they've like flipped the switch, like, okay, it's time to buy the boat or buy the jet or buy the island or whatever it may be, how much of a bidding war, how much competition once there's a, hey, I have this business, I want to sell it. How many Arthurs are out there pounding at their door saying, pick me, pick me?
There are a lot of people pounding on the door. Hopefully, they're not Arthurs. Generally, they are this underground network, if you will, of cold callers. And they're sending letters and they're calling CEOs saying, I've got a buyer for you. And rarely do they really. And they're trying to build networks that they could, deal pipelines that they can sell to private equity firms. It's very impersonal. It's frustrating for business owners. They typically throw a letter like that into their trash can every week. What they want to hear is a genuine personal conversation with somebody in the know who can inform them about the process, no strings attached.
Sounds like wholesaling in the single family real estate world, because that's the world I come from, single family real estate, where you have a wholesaler is just somebody who maybe doesn't have the bank account to actually buy the house. But what they do have is the ability to knock on a door and be like, hey, I want to buy your house. They get a contract, and then they would sell the contract to somebody else. They would assign it and take a $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 assignment fee. So, but they don't have an end buyer. They get the deal locked up and then they offload it. Is that kind of what they're doing?
Yeah, it's very similar, but you might sell your house to an aggregator like that, but if you've got a $50 million company, you're not going to entertain that. And let's remember, the family and the leadership of this company is deathly afraid of anyone finding out. They don't want their suppliers or customers, employees. If you're going to sell your house, you put a sign out front. That doesn't happen in the ownership of family companies world. The last thing they want is word getting out. And so you design a process where you can sign a non-disclosure agreement, get the information, make an offer. No one knows until if the deal doesn't make, no one knows. If it does make, they don't know till after it's already happened. So it's the most public, ultra secret marriage process. It'd be like it'd be like having the wedding and telling everyone show up today for this wedding I never told you about.
Oh, but by the way, we've actually already signed the agreement at the courthouse. This is just the celebration.
Yeah, here's the signed marriage license. Here's your slice of cake.
It's funny because this kind of dovetails into earlier conversation about the privacy aspect of the private equity world and how that mentality probably translate over, but you still have to have that deal flow. You still have to have the notoriety, the authority, the credibility. That way, when somebody does call you with a referral, somebody could Google you and be like, yeah, we're legit.
We also have to think of skill sets. So the family owner is possibly the smartest person in the world in that industry, but they most likely have never sold a company. So they're being asked to do a task that they don't know about. And so they revert to, what are other things I've sold and how did I do it? How did I sell my car? How did I sell the house? And that's not the process. And so it's helpful to tell the owner, here's how the selling of the company process works. And the quality of the process is driven by the preparation. And take a year, get everything really, really, really ready. And, get your key individuals under employment agreements, get long-term contracts from your customers if possible, lock everything down that you can. Why does a treasury or a triple net lease, sell at a 4 or 5% cap rate? That's a very low return. And that's because they're fairly certain. So if I've got that low of a cap rate, on the private equity world, it's a completely different animal. You might have it 5 times EBITDA. That's like a 20% or more IRR cap rate. Why are these two industries so different? Because businesses aren't that predictable. Much of real estate is very predictable. And so what private equity and family owners should be doing is trying to make the unpredictable more predictable. And then their multiples go up and their cap rates go down.
So being on the deal table with Lane Carrick, Optima, mergers, acquisitions, I've learned a lot from him because, he's a sell side advisor, and just hearing him talk and the lessons I've gotten from him. From your standpoint, do you prefer working directly with the seller, or do you like having a middleman per se, like a Lane Carrick and Optima, that can help them hold their hand, where it's not necessarily a neutral party, but it's a layer of separation to help like you said earlier, professionalize them to get ready to actually sell?
I would like the seller to not have an investment bank, to live next door to me, and to be to be my brother-in-law.
Cut out all the fees.
But let's get to the real world.
Yeah.
And the real world is you're going to get, as a PE buyer, what you're going to get. They're either going to have an investment banker, or they're not. And there's some good aspects to both. Having an investment banker in the process is a sign of commitment to the process. That's great. The investment banker is compiling a lot of the information, getting projections put together, et cetera, et cetera. Now, do I want to be throwing a bid in with 100 other PE firms? No. But more so, the investment bankers are creating a bespoke process where they're narrowing it down to the most likely, most interested buyers, and more and more, what was the fit with the management at a certain point in the process. After you've made preliminary non-binding indications of value, you're going to be invited to the company. And that management team doesn't want to meet 100 people. They want to meet 5. And they want to see what the fit is. And so the investment banker helps the process. Yes, there's some more competition. I'd prefer a one-off negotiation with the family seller. But, you have to keep in mind with the family, in going back to your public company world, you have 3 bubbles. You've got the company, you've got the board, you've got the shareholders. In a family company, there's one bubble, and all 3 of those sit on top of each other. So, that family owner, it can help for them to have somebody hold their hand in the process, because they're doing all 3 of those bubbles that you see in public companies, being a completely separate group of people.
So being that you're in infrastructure, metals, air defense, I could just assume the valuation of these companies and acquisition costs could be anything from 50 million to 5 billion or 50 billion. What typical, do you have an average? Do you have, what's your ribbon?
In these days of private equity, it's gotten so big that I'm not even in the shallow end of the swimming pool. I'm over in the kiddie pool.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking.
Let's define that, because my kiddie pool, I guarantee you my kiddie pool is a lot different than your kiddie pool. I saw that top hat at your Harvard picture.
That's a great top hat. Thank you. The kiddie pool for us would be, companies in the 5 to 10 million of EBITDA range. I don't really care what revenue is as much. It's really that EBITDA range. And then we'd like to see a path under our ownership for that to get to 10 to 25 million of EBITDA.
And then as far as acquisition, you were talking about anywhere from 5 to 20 multiple. What is your acquisition rate? Or is it always based off of EBITDA?
Well, our multiple is going to be lower than most. Still respectful and still workable, but we're more likely to be in the 4 to 7 times EBITDA range. And that's not atypical for that smaller size company. As companies get bigger, they're going to cross the double digit. They're going to get into the low teens type multiples on EBITDA as things get big. but we're comfortable in that sort of 4 to 7 range.
So 20 million to 100 million range?
We're not going to get up to $100 million price. A great price for us is 15 to 40.
Mm-hmm. And what comes first, the deal or the capital?
Well, both business models work. They've even named the other business model independent sponsor. Independent sponsor, they find the deal and then they raise the capital. There's a lot of pluses to that. And then you obviously have funds similar to the ones I've raised, where you have the committed capital already. It's an easier sell to convince a family company to sell when you say, I've already got the equity over here. But the independent sponsor model works as well. And there's some great independent sponsors here in Dallas and across Texas.
So you go to your network and be like, hey, we're targeting a metals, or do you say, hey, these are the industries we're targeting all, and the first thing that comes through, that's what we're going to deploy to? Or do your investors kind of know where they're going to be at first?
They commit the dollars, initially with no idea of what's going to be in the fund. They know with us it'll be in Texas, and they know probably it's going to be in those industry groups. Then you've set a target size of the fund. For math purposes, let's say it's 100 million. Generally, there's an opportunity to do a first close once you get up to a certain percentage of fund raise, capital commitment signed. Let's say that's 20%. So once you've raised 20 million, you switch the sign on the front door from closed to open. The lunch counter's operating, and you're looking for the first company to buy. It's great to buy a company early at that time. You have the capital, and nothing helps you do the rest of the fundraising than to be able to talk about the deal that's already in the fund. That starts molding the clay, and they start to see how the portfolio is going to fill out. So there's an opportunity to be baking the cake at the same time as you're buying all the ingredients.
I literally was just on a call 2 hours ago with a friend of mine who was she's on her second fund, and she was we hadn't spoken in a while, and she was saying how hard it is to raise for fund one, but how she didn't use the word easy, but how it's a different ball game when you can already prove returns from fund one, and fund two is a different ball game altogether.
Follow-on funds can be very easy or very hard, and it all depends how the earlier ones go.
Right.
And unfortunately, as humans coming from the caveman day, we learn not to pet the rattlesnake. You learn things, but most of our decision making as humans is rear view mirror based. What happened the last time I did this, or the last time I invested in that fund? So it's hard. It's hard to overcome problems, and it could be as simple as it's hard to get a lot of exits during COVID, for example. Then it became hard to raise funds during COVID. It's very near-term, rearview mirror based. If you were to say, I'm going to raise a fund to invest in AI and semiconductors and data centers in 2023, you wouldn't get much interest. Today, that's where all the money's going.
Right.
So, timing means a lot for fundraising.
So for your firm, what is your target fund size?
The last two were 85 and 165. And frankly, I kind of like the 85 size better.
And how many companies are you trying to fill in that fund, or is it based off whatever comes across at that time?
Typical PE structure might be 5 to 7 platform companies, and then doing add-on acquisitions where you can of those. So it might be a lot of acquisitions, but 5 to 7 platforms. We've typically had our funds be evergreen for a certain number of years. So if you have an exit in the first couple of years, you can redeploy. You send all the gain to the investors, and you can redeploy the capital into a new portfolio company. But that's a rare attribute. What is growing in popularity is permanently evergreen funds, where they just go on and on and on and on. And that's a niche, but that's gaining popularity. There's also a growing arena of funds where you can come and go. So, historically, if you're in a private equity fund, you're locked up for the duration. If you are an institution, you want to lighten your allocation to private equity or to alternatives, you can do a secondary sale. But now there's a growing arena where they set up a fund and they keep updating the NAV as you go, and new money can come in and old money can go out.
Wouldn't there be penalties on the outgoing?
There's gating processes, like not everyone can leave the party at the same time. A couple people in, couple people out. But there's a growing evergreen structure combined with investors being able to still come in while you're underway or leave.
How many funds have you had in the past, and how many do you have active right now?
We've had 6 total. We have portfolio companies in 4, but 2 are the same vintage year. So it's technically really portfolio companies.
And how many portcos do you have?
Roughly 8 portfolio companies currently, and we've exited 36.
What do you think and this is not financial math, it's just conversational topic, but like, what's the typical gain on that? 30%, 50%, 3,000%?
Well, I think you're quoting, beginning to end.
Yeah.
Our long-term IRR is in the low teens, which doesn't sound super juicy, but that's also the case for Berkshire Hathaway. And getting an 18-year 12, 13% IRR is great. Our multiple on invested capital is typically 2 times. We put $1 in through distributions, through sale, we're usually going to get $2 out.
How many failures have you had?
We've had our share. I was completely dark-haired when I started this process.
I'm 26 years old, and I look like this.
So we've had failures. Generally, it's not a complete wipeout. Generally, we've gotten some return of capital along the way, but we've had our lumps.
What is the greatest lesson from those failures?
Well, the biggest lesson was what we feel we've already corrected, which is letting the company kind of go out into the playground unsupervised. The weekly meetings, the weekly calls, the regular interface, the regular visits, the hourly workers at these companies, they know me. I shake every hand of every worker. I go through the plant. Like we're engaged. I've got a collection of golf shirts that have each portfolio company, and I have long sleeve shirts that actually have my name on them. Like we are engaged. And I think it was during periods where we focused on fundraising and deal sourcing, and we didn't intensely observe our portfolio. But that was endemic of the industry as well. It used to be a board member go have a board meeting every 3 months.
Walk in with the nice watches and the fancy suits, then just swing around and not let the domain experts be the experts.
And often, the board meetings were off-site. Like you were never seeing the company in the industry of old. So I think, private equity has got a lot bigger. There are more private equity funds in the United States than there are McDonald's locations. Now, caveat, I'm talking about individual funds, not private equity firms. So like a big firm might have a dozen funds, but there are more funds than McDonald's. That's a lot. That's a mature industry.
Well, it's interesting because the same thing with family offices. Like I forgot what the number was, but if you go back 25 years, the amount of family offices were nowhere near what it is now. Same thing with private equity and funds.
Yeah.
So and again, it goes back to that 8,000 public companies to 4,000, how everything is just kind of privatized.
Yeah. Although I think there were a lot of family offices, if you think of the Rockefeller family, et cetera, they've probably been operating a family office for 150 years.
Or
But
the Rothschilds.
so I think they were out there, but there's certainly many more now, just as there's many more multimillionaires now.
Right.
And I think the family office is a great concept. Initially, they were kind of more on, we're just going to invest in funds and that. And now they're proactively buying, have been for over a decade, proactively buying their own portfolio companies. And they have a terrific appeal because they can be forever owners. Like, to a seller, a family, like, we'll be your forever owner. That has a lot of sizzle.
Let's talk about private equity culture. Because if you look at like the movies from the 80s, the private, like, all I could think about, I think there's a tendency to watch a lot of the movie and content from the 80s, 90s and think of like the was it Gecko, Martin
Yeah.
Gecko, whatever his name was from
Yeah.
Wall Street. I understand that was a different animal, but then you look at like Richard Gere's character in Pretty Woman
Yeah.
and all that culture aspect. It seems like there has, and obviously there's reality and media, but how much of that was true and how much of that was just Hollywood making stuff fun?
Well, the movies looked a lot more fun than my day-to-day world. So, we would like to be more like the movie version than the movie version would like to be like us. I don't think it depicts the industry well. I think the industry is so ultra important, for nothing else, and it now owns so many companies. So many of the products we use on a day-to-day basis and services, et cetera, are private equity owned. It would blow people's mind if you listed all the brands and all the things that have private equity backing. And the private equity bunch is a serious bunch. Like, they're coming to work for long hours of every day and on the weekend to make these companies better. And there has been no better force on the globe than business for freeing people from poverty and lack of health care. Business lifts up globally people. And to the extent that you have private equity firms making companies, employ more people, more successful, et cetera, it's a force for good. And I think as an industry, we don't communicate that force for good. If we had statistics out there, how many people in the United States work for a private equity owned company? It's a meaningful percentage of our $350 million population. Meaningful. And, we should, as an industry, communicate that better. The industry should be talking about, like, what inventions came from a private equity owned company, what things have bettered life and pursuit of happiness.
Well, the reason I'm bringing up culture is because the nature of being private and kind of secretive, you only see what people make up, like, that are on the movies or TV shows. And it feels like there's been kind of this hidden culture, this hidden world of it. And you really only see the perceived negative, like Toys R Us or Red Lobster. And you're just like, you have these brands. And again, there's always nuance that no one's ever going to look into. All they see is you've got this brand that people love. Private equity came in, sold everything out, and then it died. And obviously there's way more to the stories. So I think, to your point, there is so much good, but nobody knows about it. Nobody sees it. They only see the negatives.
I don't think that Hollywood hurts private equity any more or less than they hurt public equity. Like, there have been a lot of movies about public companies and malfeasance and relationships in the office and all kinds. So I think Hollywood sort of has a beef against business to begin with, and I don't think we're singled out too badly. But the Richard Gere Pretty Woman, let me buy the shipyard and sell off all the components. That was in the 80s. Now it's buy and build. And we as an industry have not communicated that shift. But, we're trying to build bigger, more successful companies, and oftentimes doing add-on acquisitions of smaller companies that are ready to exit, make a bigger, more successful, more efficient business. So we've done just as bad a job at PR than big public companies.
And that's kind of what I was getting to with the whole culture conversation and the cyclical nature of, like I said, the Richard Gere character coming in, corporate rating, buying and cutting it up, making a ton of money that way versus the buy and build. Because it seems like nowadays it's just, I haven't looked at the ABC Disney mind map of companies lately, but the last time I saw it, it was just like a huge map of all these different companies that one is that they owned, and I don't even know if Disney's at the top or if it's ABC or if it's some hidden entity that nobody's ever heard of.
The mouse always wins.
The mouse, yeah.
They're just going to keep jagging up the prices.
Yeah, I was at Disney World in January, and it was just like, I hadn't been in, I don't know, 30 years when I was a kid with my parents, and I just couldn't believe how expensive everything was.
Yeah.
We talked about EBITDA a lot. What do you think about Warren Buffett and his thoughts on
He's probably right. EBITDA is backing out depreciation. For most companies, depreciation is a real thing. Like, you've got to keep up with your CapEx. Taxes, they're a real thing. Like, interest, it's a real thing. So I respect Warren Buffett, and I love his industry inputs along the way. But EBITDA has a role. It's trying to communicate, here is the most basic gross cash flow. If nothing was spent, no debt was serviced, no CapEx was bought, here's what we've got. And it's just like a family budget. What's the gross income? And then what's in our budget to spend? So just like a family says, what's mom and dad, what's their W-2 look like on a gross standpoint, and then where are we putting it to work? And it's a tool, but no one should confuse EBITDA with net income. And net income is $1 of net income is much more impressive to me than $1 of EBITDA.
So let's shift to the role of education, because I know you have we talked about on the phone the other day about your role at Harvard and the Alumni Association and how you're still very proud and still very connected. Where do you see education in 2026, especially with AI and everything, in people's development in the private equity world?
The development of mankind rides on the shoulders of education, from all the way from kindergarten through graduate schools. Harvard has an important role in that. I also serve as chair of Alexander Hamilton Scholars, brings in students from very low income background with very high educational aspirations, usually first generation college, and mentors them for 5 years throughout their journeys. I just love the stories from Hamilton Scholars. Alexander Hamilton is my fourth great grandfather, and he, at the age of 14, had been disowned by George Hamilton. His mother had died. He was alone in the West Indies in the 1700s. And what I tell the Hamilton Scholars is, if you can be in the 1700s penniless, alone, and then be the first Secretary of the Treasury, if he can do that, you can do anything. So I think education is a key role. Right now, I think it's an important time for us to think about, what are the skills that are needed for the future? What are we teaching now? How are we teaching it? How do we make sure people just don't lean on ChatGPT to do all the work? I mean, I'm dating myself, but when I would do a paper in school or in college, it was go down to the Microfiche machine, look through articles in old New York Times, looking in card decks at the library, going through encyclopedias. It taught you how to learn. And using ChatGPT does not teach you how to learn. It teaches you how to use a tool. And we've never had a tool that didn't do exactly what we say. We had a shovel. When we told it not to do anything, it didn't do anything. When we told it to dig a hole, it dig a hole. ChatGPT is thinking on its own. One of the first things it's trying to figure out is who you are and what gender are you. Like, it's doing things that we're not telling it to do. And we need to have serious thought about our education system and over-reliance on a tool we've never dealt with the attribute of it's doing things that it wants to do that you're not telling it.
That whole world, I mean, I play with AI daily and trying to help build this business. And what you were just saying, it kills me all the time when it's just like, I want you to do this. And then it'll go on and like, what about this over here? I'm like, stop, just this. What about over here? No, this, and just stop it. Like, and it almost squirrel brains more than me as a person, ADHD, and I already do all that. So I don't need another tool that does it as well. It just amplifies my ADHD.
Yeah.
But Harvard specifically, it feels like the last several hundred years, Harvard's been the pinnacle of financial markets of, if you wanted to be a lawyer, you went to Harvard. If you wanted to be a finance guy, you went to Harvard. Is Harvard still the tippy toppy of that world?
They have a very important role to fill, as do all research universities. Most of our great inventions have come from research universities. We wouldn't have won World War II without the great universities and all the research and the population of graduate students that go for PhDs that do important research. Harvard has the most Medal of Honor winners of any university except West Point and Annapolis. That's something to think about. Like, the leaders coming out of these universities, aren't just in the book racks having deep thoughts. They're doing important things. And Harvard's had a long role. They had to cancel the 183rd commencement for the American Revolutionary War. Like, they've been helping this country, as other research universities have, for a very, very long time. They have not done a great job at communicating what does that mean if you're not part of the 400,000 graduates globally that went there. Like, how Harvard needs to communicate to our broader population, here are inventions we created, here are important things in history that we were leaders in. What's their relevance? And they are extremely relevant, as the other research colleges are. They need to communicate that well. Harvard gave an honorary degree to George Washington while housing troops during the Revolutionary War. Like, there's stories to be told. There's relevance to be communicated. We need to lose the elitism and, amongst the Ivy League, it's need-based scholarship. You don't get a scholarship for running with a football. You get a scholarship because you need it. Anyone who gets in gets a scholarship at a certain amount of income, as across the Ivy League and many other universities. We should be educating first-generation students. We should be using the resources and endowments to do that. And we should be communicating that to the broader population.
Yeah, it's funny because a buddy of mine, my best friend, he did a summer. He went to SMU, but he did a summer class. I don't know, exchange program, but he went to Yale, and it was funny because and this is 20 years ago, but he was talking about how when he did that, he was blown away how smart everyone was. Like, all the Yale students, the elitism. But at the same time, they would have these world-changing conversations about Nancy, the Walmart attendant, checkout lady, but never talked to Nancy. And because, well, we know more than her. And my buddy is from Alabama, and he's like, why wouldn't you talk? And he's like, well, she doesn't know her problems. It's like, so there's that elitism where it's like, we know more than you, even though we've never talked to you. So
I just saw the Odyssey last night in 70 millimeter. And one of the quotes I loved from Odysseus is, you can't really see a man unless you're below him. Like, it's the people, are you good to the people in all stages of life? Are you good to the person that hands you your dry cleaning? Those are the people that really see who you are. And we need to teach our young, our up and coming people, take care of the people underneath you, because that's who matters. I have to tell my Yale joke. You open the door,
please.
So how many Yaleys does it take to change a light bulb?
Either none or all.
3. 1 to change a light bulb, 1 to mix the martinis, and a 3rd to talk about how great the old light bulb was.
And what's the classic Harvard joke? How do you know somebody went to Harvard? They told you.
Over and over.
Yeah. But
Cheers.
I like that Odysseus line from the movie, because I haven't seen the movie yet, but it kind of goes into the role of leadership in your portcos, because obviously as an owner, you're the umbrella, and there could be a tendency to be the downward facing, look down the mountain. But as you stated earlier, you're relying on the domain knowledge of the people that are there. So how do you balance leadership with owning, with the pressures of making money, with the trust of the people that are in those seats?
Well, a little lesson I picked up doing Marine Corps Reserve in college is that leadership is like a string. You cannot push it from behind. You have to get in front, and you have to be willing to do the thing that might be considered beneath your position. And people, in companies are constantly looking at leadership, and they're particularly looking at leadership when things are challenged. So if you're a private equity leader and something bad happens at portfolio company A, the bank's looking at you, your investors are looking at you, your management team's looking at you, the employees are looking at you, and you have to be the absolute calming agent and reset the tone and start working the problem. And what I like to say is, don't use the word problem, use the word puzzle. People love to solve puzzles, and a problem is just a puzzle that hasn't been solved yet. So engage the team and say, listen, let's all work together and solve this puzzle.
So here's a question that I know you're not going to answer. What is your favorite company so far that you've either exited from or still in, or tell me a success story or a failure story, but what's been your favorite so far?
They all have had wonderful moments, wonderful people. There's nothing like private equity to feel like you're on a team. We all did sports as a team. You are lockstep with the management team for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. You really get that team energy. And but one of my portfolio companies right now, State Service in Ingleside, Texas, or Corpus Christi, the leadership is 3rd and 4th generation, and they constantly reinvent themselves. And that has been so great to watch. So the DNA of the company in maritime construction was building offshore production platforms for shallow water Gulf of Mexico. The platform would actually sit on the seabed with legs coming up, and then an above the water platform, decking, etc. When Deepwater Horizon happened, the regulations on all Gulf of America drilling went way up. Shallow water couldn't afford it. That industry was declining. This management team pivoted And they went international. They went to Malaysia, and they went to Nigeria, and around the globe selling these platforms. And then when the Eagleford developed, not too far north of Corpus, generating a lot of natural gas liquids with no place to go, they reinvented the marine terminal market and building modular docks on ground and then shipping them by barge to wherever the pipelines from folks like Enterprise and Phillips 66 and Buckeye were building from the Eagleford to the Corpus Christi ship channel. And that modular construction put on its head the way we've been building docks as a civilization for tens of thousands of years. Like, docks are built from where you want the dock out. The whole infrastructure of the marine terminal is built in another location and then installed with giant cranes on barges. And now they're building components of LNG facilities and huge multi-story, 3- and 4-story modules for LNG plants. So that's 4 industries that they've navigated through as a management team. And that kind of innovation and resilience, I just absolutely love.
So the key word I heard in that was building. Going back to what we were talking about with like the Richard Gere's of dismantling, and how now we're in building. And it sounds like that's what you gravitate towards, is the building nature of it.
Building companies, building management teams, and what I like to mentor with is the analogy of the toolbox. I want every member of the private equity team, every member of the management team to be building their toolbox. None of us need a toolbox with 3 wrenches in it. We need the hammer, we need the screwdriver, we need the wrench on down. How do you cross-train? How do you build capabilities? How do you get the CEO who hasn't spent much time in finance or accounting to learn the accounting side, or vice versa? How do you get the controller stuck in their office to walk the plant floor? How do we build everyone's toolbox, make them more capable, resilient, et cetera? And I speak that when I talk to business school students. Don't do only one thing. Like, take on experiences, either your summer internships, your job before business school, your job after business school. Make sure they're all different enough that you're building your toolkit.
Which schools are you working with?
I've spoken to all the major Texas business school programs, whether it's UNT or Cox School of Business at SMU or Rice, UT, Macombs, on down the list, University of North Texas, et cetera. Love speaking to them. I don't have a graduate degree, so I can't be a professor or can't teach a course there, but they dust me off and bring me down and say, how's private equity relevant to business schools?
Well, the reason I ask is, I mean, I recently did the executive MBA program at SMU, and if you weren't already there, I'd be like, hey, let's get you on the phone with Dean Milborn and get you in there.
Well, I always love going back and to all the different business schools and showing the relevance of private equity in the world in general and what our role is and how it can be an exciting career for these up-and-coming MBA students. I also tell them working at a portfolio company can be a great experience. Like, step off the treadmill or the escalator of private equity and go be involved in a management team of portfolio company. You'll learn more there, and it'll be very helpful if you go back to working at a PE shop.
Before we close out, I do want to ask, what puzzles are you working through right now?
Well, there's always interesting things to figure out, and we're on a constant cycle of running portfolio companies, exiting portfolio companies, raising capital, buying new companies. There's always new things to work on, specific to just for fun, for Trinity Forge. There's a tremendous need for forge components in aerospace and defense. We make everything from engine mounts to landing gears to bomb components, missile components. These are needed to protect our warfighters. We're trying to do it, more of it. But in forging, the next size up frame for the forge that we would want is 680,000 pounds. I mean, these are big pieces of equipment that are multi-stories. And so we're working on a puzzle of how do we take the maximum part size that we can sell to our customer base, including the 6 largest aerospace defense companies in the world. How do we sell them bigger parts? Submarines have big components to them. Military aircraft have big components to them. Aircraft carriers, ships, and now increasingly all kinds of missiles and drones. There's a lot of needs. We need to have more capabilities at Trinity Forge. It's just they don't come in little bite sizes. They come in big CapEx chunks.
With your role, do you try to ideate solutions, or are you just the bank? And by bank, I don't mean a lender. I mean you're the wallet is a better way to say.
We're authorizing the capital expenditure. Oftentimes, that's a discussion with the senior lender, for a term loan to do it. We're there as a sounding board to management to say, what are all the outer boundaries of the decisions we can make? Let's not do this. Let's have, the wide part of the megaphone, not the narrow part. Let's think how big we could do it. Let's think about where we do it, how we do it, how we communicate it to the customers. How do we get our returns? What are competitors doing? What are companies around the globe doing? My job is to open the prism. Let's look as broadly as we can. Let's make sure we're open as possible. I love a quote from Winston Churchill. Before the United States had gotten in the war, we were supplying England with the military equipment they needed to hold on as long as possible. He was going to speak to Congress about the Lend-Lease Act, and we were going to potentially lend Britain 100 destroyers to keep the Atlantic pipeline of shipping protected from U-boats. And Winston Churchill said, the great thing about the American people is they always do the right thing. Pause. After they fully explore every other possible option. So that may be a negative way of thinking about exploring a lot of options, but we're there to help management teams think broadly.
You're the spaghetti guy.
Yeah, I'm throwing the spaghetti.
So what about opportunities? What opportunities are you looking for right now?
We're looking for great companies with great management teams. There is no better state to be in than Texas. We're number 2 in terms of number of data centers in the country. We're number 1 in terms of data centers under construction. I may not have an investment in companies that build data centers or supply chips, but those data centers need power, they need water, they need construction companies. Texas is just such a vibrant place to do business. It's no state income tax, great regulatory environment, lots of inland ports, lots of physical ports, great energy infrastructure, great chemicals infrastructure. There are lots of companies for us to look at and ways for us to make great returns for our investors.
Yeah, we didn't even get into the infrastructure side of this conversation because that could be a whole other, hour or so.
Right.
I do want, because I know you do a lot of civic duties and whatnot, and I do want to end on, how do you balance civic and your civic duty versus your capitalistic nature?
I feel like philanthropy is great, but civic is even more important. You can change more lives by getting all of our quasi-government and government entities working in concert and working efficiently. So I've served as vice chairman of DART, both before and after we added light rail, one of the best light rail systems in the country. I've been chairman of the North Dallas Chamber, which has been a great force for good, including repealing the Wright Amendment and making Love Field such a great asset for the city. I've been chairman of Visit Dallas, or the Convention Visitors Bureau, and my board service there, we went from 15th in terms of convention tourism to top 5. And by the way, as you know, we don't have Disneyland, we don't have ski resorts, we don't have an ocean in Dallas, so those are not easy things to do. I've served on the host committee for the Super Bowl. So, I think civic service, you can do more good for more people. And we have to think of Dallas. I-30 goes right through downtown Dallas, and half of the population of the city of Dallas is north, half of the population is south, half of the land mass is north, half is south. 85% of the tax base in the city of Dallas is north of I-30. We cannot continue to have two environments here. DART helps that north-south migration, but we have to use every tool in our toolbox: education, transportation, economic development. I'm hearing more and more. The available land to build is all sucked up north of downtown Dallas. The available land is south, Wilmer, Hutchins, et cetera. We need to make economic opportunity uniform throughout the city, and our civic organizations and our government entities can do a lot of that.
Arthur, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate. I feel like, we kind of went long. I feel like we could have kept going for a couple hours, made this a Joe Rogan thing, and just gone all day.
Great questions, and I love sharing some time with you today.
Appreciate it.